With a husband with various health problems, we've also been regular, thankfully less so recently, but regular recipients of paramedic services to help Stan going to hospital. So for all sorts of reasons, this was a request that I was delighted to accept. I agree with Andy and others' points that sort of the commercial arrangement with myself is not something that would normally be shared with people. It is a private arrangement. I'm not a director. It is the board of directors who are responsible for ensuring value for public money. But if anyone wants to catch me over coffee, I might just let you know what's going on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabby. And I think Ingrid spoke, as you said, very eloquently about what she was doing for us at the board meeting. So people want to catch up on that. I think we'll do that outside of this meeting. So any other points on the minutes? Okay. We go to the action log. In terms of the in-progress items that haven't yet been completed, I understand, Izzy, that the overview of volunteering is actually going to come in September now, rather than today. The new executive portfolios, I think have gone out in draft, but they've now been finalised, so they can indeed go out, but I don't think it has done yet. Consider whether the volunteer workforce can be included in the NHS staff survey. I think the answer to that is no, they can't be. So we need to find an alternative mechanism for finding out their views. And I think the final one around Peter bringing a proposal about how the involvement of the council will be in the recruitment of the new CEO. I think Peter has got some ideas and is involving people. Yeah?
He hasn't involved people yet. He's
No,
committed to bring a proposal to the COG about how the COG will be involved.
Yeah. But as the process has only just started, I guess the first task of Odgers is to come up with a long list and then it'll be a short list. So that will take them a while, I guess.
Are we having an update on volunteering with the Trust today?
No. The action was to agree when it was appropriate for an update on volunteering to come, and that's in September.
It's in September.
Okay, so Geraint, you're on.
Okay, Thomas, I'll drink first. Thank you, Graham. There's various papers that have been circulated. The first is the Chief Executive report to the July board. I won't go verbatim because obviously hopefully you've read it. I think the key thing there is the first issue, which is what Maggie has picked up on and colleagues picked up, about the CQC. So I'll deal with that first. And I think I would like to formally apologise on behalf of the board to the Council of Governors about what has been allowed to put in the public domain and what hasn't been allowed to put in the public domain. I think you've got to understand we're going through a due diligence process with the CQC around their report. They haven't formally issued us with a draft report yet. And what they're telling us is that until that draft report has been finalised, nothing can be put formally into the public domain. What I will give you today, though, is the high-level information that I can give you from the letter we received into the organisation. And the letter we received basically covered 6 key areas that the Trust needs to address. The first was the governance arrangements in place, including systems to assess, monitor and improve the quality and safety of the services provided to people receiving care from the Trust are not operated effectively. This basically, do our policies and procedures make sense to our staff and are they basically complied with? And the key areas there were around infection prevention and control, i.e. hand hygiene bare below the elbow. Another area was medicines management and another area was safeguarding. So we have to do a lot of work with our organisation between now and September, because we've got to address this issue by the 10th of September to ensure that our policies and procedures are basically policies that are up to date, but also that our staff understand their roles, their responsibility, accountability in those policy procedures, and are actually they're implemented. That's a key issue for the Trust. And basically, the examples the CQC gave the Trust was that they witnessed our staff not being bare below the elbow, not utilising hand washing facilities when they could, not using hand gel when they could, and also basically using blue disposable gloves more than once. So there's a huge challenge for us about that agenda. And what we've done to address that is to actually reinforce in our organisation themes of the month. So this month, July, we're in, is basically infection control month. So AD, our infection control managers, working with the operations team to go out to the staff to communicate the policy and procedure, what's required around it, and then how we need to ensure we're complying with it. And then next month will be medicines management, and the month after will be safeguarding, and then we'll reiterate that process. So we're trying to ensure we can address that throughout the organisation. Does that make sense to colleagues on the table? Why that was picked up? I have spoken to various managers in the organisation and asked them, do they recognise the feedback from the CQC? And the feedback has been yes. So our managers in the organisation recognise that our organisation actually was not complying with our stated policy and procedures in terms of those 3 key areas. The next area is systems in place to ensure sufficient staff are employed, appropriate deployment of staff and staff competence are not operated effectively. So basically, do we have sufficient staff in place to meet our demand on the service? We know that currently we have major gaps in our terms of our staffing area, predominantly around paramedics. We are roughly 300 paramedics down this year already against what we need against the demand on the trust. And therefore what we are doing is we're looking at how we can improve our recruitment processes to be a place that people want to come and work. And also when people come to work here, how we retain them. So we know our retention problem is an issue. We roughly have a 20% turnover rate currently in the trust at the moment. So we need to ensure that the organisation, while to recruit staff, maintains staff high retention. What we're doing around that is looking at how do we recruit staff, where do we get staff from, and how can we maximise the potential to recruit staff into the organisation. The challenge we've got as a trust is every other English ambulance trust has the same level of vacancy gap, has the same level of pressure. So we are in a very competitive environment to recruit staff. We need to think about how can we do that. So what we're looking at is where can we get short-term fixes to enable us to address that issue. Predominantly, can we look at overseas recruitment? If so, where from? Also, how can we look at being an attractive organisation to recruit to? The one benefit of the trust is we have a very successful career pathway for paramedics in the organisation, and we also have 2 enhanced roles that seem to ensure that people want to come to work in the organisation get developed as paramedic practitioners and critical care paramedics. So that's what we need to do around that agenda. And then in terms of 111, we need to look at ensuring that we have sufficient call takers in our 111 service to answer the phones. We've got a revised trajectory to improve our recruitment in 111, and we're on track in June. And we hit our trajectory in June to ensure the service is hitting the standards we need to. So actually 111 is successfully turning around these issues. There's only 1 month, we need to ensure it continues the rest of the year. Another key area is in the EOC. We need to ensure we're recruiting the right level of EMA, so emergency medical advisors, sorry, I'm jargon sometimes, I apologise. So again, we're looking at how can we ensure we're bringing staff into the EOC centre to address the major areas we have there. At the moment, we're on track to recruit our EMAs into our call centre. So a big gap at the moment on our staffing is in paramedics. And we need to ensure we bring that forward. Any questions on that? No. The next issue is about 111, I've spoken about, is the key issue is do we have sufficient staff to answer the phones? I've told you about that already. The 4th issue is adequate processes are not in place to enable you to ensure that equipment is properly maintained and secured appropriately. What the CQC saw was basically that in some areas our oxygen cylinders were not being conveyed and stored properly. They were flying flat, not being vertical. So there's a challenge about how do we ensure that our staff and our systems are delivering what we need to do in terms of our equipment in the community, and it can be safely utilised and safely used. So that's the example they gave us. And we've already spoke about that in various forums, and asking to test to that as well. Then the 5th one was safeguarding process to prevent abuse of service users and not operate effectively. Our staff currently trained to level 2. There's a view from the CQC there should be level 3. Therefore, what we need to do is ensure that we get the instruction in our organisation to train the staff to the level the CQC requires to train them to. That meant the CQC saw in the community that our staff were referring patients appropriately into either adult safeguarding issues or child safeguarding issues. So we pulled up on whether or not we had the right systems in place to refer people in appropriately. So that's what we've got to address as part of the organisation moving forward. And then finally, the systems in place for medicines management not operate safely and effectively. The key issue here from the CQC was whether or not we were legal or not, in terms of the way in which our staff utilise drugs in the community. We've had a meeting with the CQC to take that forward, and we've addressed that actually the trust is legal, and we're taking forward how we manage that forward with the CQC in terms of learning for them and learning for us. So that's basically where we are on the high-level issues from the CQC. As Maggie did pick up on the original lecture, they did pick up on bullying and harassment in the organisation. That's a cultural issue in the trust. And that's why Ingrid Prescott has become into the organisation to work with us to address the bullying and harassment culture, how we're looking at our policies and procedures around that, how we're looking at how we implement them, the behaviours around it, and ensuring that we address that issue moving forward. So that's what the trust is doing on the key issues from the CQC. Any questions? Sorry, Margaret.
This whole business of the CQC and our concerns that we did not have a proper report at the last COG. I think the thing that disappointed me was that we're months on from being found out about R3, and yet we still are subjected at these meetings to less than sensible reports from the exec. Reports are the wording that is used really is it's not straightforward, and we're adults, and what we're asking for is the exec to speak plainly and say if you can't give us any information, and don't waffle. And this isn't just directed at you, Geraint, it's directed at all the execs. So say if it's the information cannot be released, just say that. Don't sort of embellish little things from reports. We don't want to hear that. We just want it all to be very straightforward and the truth. And then we can manage it. And then we will feel that we're not being, things are not being hidden from us.
Okay.
So I think, Maggie, you made that point really very, very clear, and we'll take that back to through the board, that's how we'd like to be in the future. I think, Geraint, hopefully today you didn't waffle on and you were fairly clear.
That wasn't
so
it.
That's a good step in the right direction. Graham, you wanted to...
Graham Gibbons, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the appointed governor for the local authorities in the SECAM region, namely Kent, Surrey, East and West Sussex, Surrey, Brighton and Medway. And I effectively account to the 6 leaders of the 6 authorities, I guess is my role. I have always been told, Chairman, that my top priority where I am is safeguarding, and I have to therefore express massive concern about what Geraint has just said. We are here to challenge the non-executive directors, which I'm told is why the governing body really exists. So I really have to challenge the non-executive directors who is responsible from the non-executive directors for ensuring that safeguarding is properly being coordinated within this trust, because the criticisms that have been made, as you've just announced, would seem to be very serious. The fact that we don't even know that we're properly referring the appropriate vulnerable children and vulnerable adults must be a major indictment. I think, speaking on behalf of the 6 leaders, they would want an assurance, I think, that safeguarding measures are properly going to be put in place within this trust, that there is a non-executive director who is actually taking safeguarding as probably a personal and key interest, because I have to, within Kent, and I know my equivalents in the other authorities are expected to do the same thing. Therefore, I would have thought somebody should be taking from the public's point of view, safeguarding very seriously.
So
I put this to you, Chairman, because I think this group today do deserve an answer as to why the criticisms about safeguarding have been made. There are other issues about the balanced scorecard, the dashboard, that I will come back to in a minute. But again, it's not possible to determine from this whether safeguarding training in itself has been properly covered. It does say mandatory training is red, so I would have to ask, and I would hope mandatory safeguarding training is not red. It would be quite good to have that information.
So, just dealing with that issue, Terry, on behalf of the non-execs, is the nominated person to help lead on safeguarding. So, Terry, I don't know whether you...
Yeah, happy to speak to that. So, Geraint said something quite important, and that is that CQC believe that all our staff should be trained to level 3. Our staff are all trained to level 2. That is not the same as saying our staff do not know how to do safeguarding. That is a difference of opinion as to the level of training that is required of staff. If CQC require us to train staff to level 3, then we will do that. My own background is I used to be accountable to one of the leaders in this area as Director of Adults. So I want the highest levels of safeguarding possible, but there are other things that staff have to do, and what I would suggest that's happened in the past is there's had to be a balance between the various demands put on people. The board receives regular reports on safeguarding and safeguarding incidents. I have not seen any evidence that this trust is unsafe. I have not seen any evidence that our staff do not understand safeguarding. I think there is good evidence, however, that we do not learn sufficiently well from safeguarding incidents, and there, I think, was some evidence that CQC would draw on that they could find evidence of not equivalent situations occurring again, but perhaps a lack of a learning culture in the trust from safeguarding issues. So I don't think we are unsafe. I think that neither safeguarding of children or safeguarding of adults is unsafe. I think our staff are well equipped and well prepared to do this, and we have colleagues in the room who represent staff who may have a view on that. But if we are required by CQC as part of a recovery plan as we move forward to train staff to level 3, we will make it a priority. The medical director has taken on responsibility for this area. He and I will be meeting later on this summer to discuss how we take this forward. Like everything else, we will have to prioritise it, but everything can't be an equal priority. Staff are trained to level 2. As I said, there are colleagues in the room who will have a view about the capacity in terms of their fellows for putting in the time that's needed. I'm undertaking the same training because I think it's important that I have a view as to how effective it is, because it's largely online training, and there'll be people around the room with views about online training. I think that the council should take comfort from the fact that if this was a particular problem, if we were not delivering on our safeguarding responsibilities, there would be far more reports to that effect coming through to the board. Our staff would be, I think, extraordinarily conscious of those issues. So this is not that we are not safe at safeguarding, it is not that we are not effective at safeguarding. There was a professional disagreement, I think, between executives in the trust and the CQC, as there were on a number of areas, as to the appropriate level of training in the organisation.
How does that get resolved, Terry? Because we clearly can't have one group saying one thing and one group saying another. How do we resolve it?
It will depend on who wins the argument. I think under the circumstances, and Geraint has more or less alluded to this, I think under the circumstances, if CQC is saying to us we need to train our staff to level 3, it would be wise to train our staff to level 3. We don't want to give them areas to complain about. We've got a range of issues that we need to address. From a personal parochial view, I would want our safeguarding to be of the highest possible standard. That comes with a cost. The executive will have to work out the cost of that, and that will have to get approval if there's a spend needed from the board. But I think probably, and colleagues around the room will have a view, I think probably we would want to be completely immune from any further criticism of CQC that our safeguarding training is perhaps not as thorough as it might be.
So do we have a timetable when we expect to make that?
So I'm discussing that with the medical director over the summer. I would expect that the board will see a paper in September that will detail some of those, and of course that will be a publicly available paper.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I can only comment from the Sussex Partnership perspective on safeguarding of adults. I can't comment on the safeguarding of children, but I want to offer some reassurance around the table that I have a direct interface with SECAM for safeguarding adults. I take a lead in some areas on that. Safeguarding Adults Board, 3 boards for Sussex. We hold multi-agency safeguarding audits annually, including a SECAM lead. I think that the agencies that you interface with would be taking action if we felt that you weren't taking appropriate action when safeguarding is required. So I hope colleagues feel some degree of assurance that I believe the practice is good. There are clearly some issues with regard to the training.
Yeah. Can I just add, for an assurance process, roughly our staff refer 400 cases every month into the respective adults and child safeguarding processes. It's not that we're not referring, we are. The challenge the CQC have given us is the level our staff are trained to, the point that Terry's picked up on. We train to level 2. The view of the CQC should be level 3. So as Terry's rightly said, we've got to go away as an executive team now and ensure we address that point in terms of the training required around that, the abstraction required around that, and what it means for the organisation moving forward. And as part of the recovery plan, which is part of the Unified Recovery Plan, that's the steps we're taking forward.
Okay, Michael.
I think this, from what I've seen of safeguarding within the organisation, I think they're doing a very good job. And this change of levels kind of going on nationally. I've worked for a couple of NHS organisations over the last couple of years, and when certainly in the last year or so, there's been a move from level 2 to level 3. So I think that's where the CQC are now bringing it to try and make it a national framework of this higher level. But from what I've seen and what I've experienced personally, when I've been out there manning, we put safeguarding in. There's been detailed feedback to the crews. There's been safeguarding in place. So I'm confident the Trust is working hard around that area.
Thank you.
If I may come back in, I've served on 2 of the safeguarding boards in the area, although the last time was some 3 years ago. I can recall no incidents at a safeguarding board level where SECAM was in any way considered to be failing in its responsibilities. Actually, my recollection is SECAM is one of the few organisations that work across the patch that's diligent on producing Section 11, which is a statutory report that partners are required to produce, are diligent on producing Section 11 reports, but also I have discovered we do send people to every safeguarding board in the region, and that is a huge commitment. I used to be in London on one of the London safeguarding boards. I can tell you that although the London Ambulance Service has 32 safeguarding boards, they don't manage to serve as more than a fraction of those.
Okay, thank you. Lucy.
So just to add, I guess, further assurance from the non-exec side. So we had our first quality and patient safety committee in the new style. Safeguarding was one of the 3 items we scrutinised. From that, and you can see the draft minutes in the board papers, we've got a list of areas where we were concerned, and they will be followed up as well in line with the plan. So I think we are focused.
So my view may be something that Charlie and Nigel and Alison may wish to disagree with, but I've certainly had a positive experience with our safeguarding process over the last few years. It's comforting that it's one of the only areas where you put a referral in that you get feedback, by and large, that tells you, what's happened and whether it was worth doing. So that alone encourages you to do it again. The bit that we talked about, I think, at Foundation Council last week is the overall pressure on staff and the long backup times, the long scene times, the difficulty with just overall work-life balance, which means that sometimes by the time you get to the computer where you have to fill in the Datix type form to make the referral, actually you may neither remember everything that you need to remember nor feel mentally capable enough to undertake as good a referral as you might wish to. And I can certainly vouch for that. The last one I did was at 2 o'clock in the morning after an extraordinary long day and 6 hours on scene, and it is a difficult thing to do. So I guess we just have to think about how we support staff at the practical level, aside from the training and aside from the processes, to make sure that they have the protected time and capability to make effective referrals into a system that I believe is quite good. As to the semantics around level 2 or 3, I'll be advised by the experts.
Well, we'll make sure that you get feedback in the next council meeting what the decision is on the 2 and 3. If I pass back to you, Geraint, to take us through the rest of the item.
I just wonder if I could make a point of clarification. I think during the discussions that have gone on this morning, from my perception, I think there's been an implication that the executive has been not very generous with the truth, or has tried to create the impression that information that the CQC gave to the Trust was withheld from you, and in particular in relation to a letter. And I wanted to go on record that I've checked the email, incoming and outgoing email in relation to this matter, and I can confirm that the warning notice that the Trust has received from the CQC wasn't available on the 10th of June. So although the minutes of the meeting on the 10th of June do refer to a letter, it wasn't a warning notice. So I'm an independent person, and I'd like it to go on record that, in my view, the arrangements with the CQC and the information they'd given us and the feedback they'd given us, both on the Friday evening and in any other correspondence that was available on the 10th of June, it was accurately reported. So for those governors who may be swayed in your opinion of the Trust and its reporting based on the information that you've heard today, I'd like you to receive some additional assurance from me that, in my opinion as an independent person, the information provided to you at the last meeting was accurate at the time that the meeting occurred, and that the inference that information was denied to you or unhelpfully kept back from you is an unfortunate implication, and that the warning notice wasn't available at that time.
So thanks for that clarification, Andy. If we can go back then to Geraint and can we are going to have a difference of opinion on this, and I think the reality is that the executive take on board, I think, the points you made earlier, Maggie. So I think that's been heard.
Clarify, I didn't say anything but a warning notice. I said that the letter said they might take regulatory action. And if you reread that letter, it's quite clear that that was in the domain of, obviously, the Trust.
The reality, of course, is that the Trust have an ongoing dialogue with the CQC following the inspection. So there is a question of when things actually happen. I think what Andy's trying to say is that the executive was as transparent as possible about the formal process. So
Maggie does. I've listened back to the last COG, and I'll just quote. David talked about some concerns around incidents. Yeah, the CQC used the phrase highly unsatisfactory. Now, he also said that some policies are out of date, whereas the CQC said there were numerous policies out of date. And we were told it was just a letter, and the CQC asked us to do various things. We're now finding out there's a warning notice and there's very serious concerns. It felt very much that everything was watered down, played down, and we weren't given a true and accurate picture of just how concerned the CQC were.
Okay. In terms of the feedback on the Friday afternoon, the CQC did not state we were going to take regulatory action against us. They didn't. Okay. No, I'm trying to be very clear with you about what was said, when, and how. So, the executive team met the CQC on the Friday of the week they came into the organisation. They've received feedback. At that meeting, the CQC did not state they were going to take regulatory action against the organisation. What they said was they gave us feedback on concerns and issues we needed to think about and address. They said we would be receiving a follow-up letter. We received a follow-up letter. The warning notice to the organisation did not come in until much later. So I'm more than happy, as the Acting Chief Executive, to, if you want, to put some timeline on what the CQC have said to us and when, what they've instructed us in inverted commas to do and when, because it's really important you understand the CQC have had a very, or I'll talk about it, instructive conversation with us. The CQC weren't happy that we put on our website the letter they sent us initially. They weren't happy we did that. So we have been challenged by the CQC about how open and transparent we are being with our public, how open and transparent we are being with you. And my intention as the Acting Chief Executive is to be open and transparent as I can be with you to ensure that we are sharing information. I would hope, Maggie, from today's engagement with you, you'd see I've been very clear about what the CQC said to us and what the issues are. So I'm endeavouring to give you what I can give you, and I'm endeavouring to ensure you are informed. I'm endeavouring to ensure that you are informed at the right time. I've had a similar conversation with the Foundation Council, and people on this table at the Foundation Council can attest to that. And I've had a similar conversation with our senior managers yesterday about where we are. So I think it's really important that you understand that the executive team is not trying to not give you information. We're trying to give you information in light of what we're being told to do, in inverted commas, by some of our external partners.
So the CQC actually said in a letter dated the 10th of May, we advised you that due to the serious nature of some of our preliminary findings, we would be meeting in the next 10 days to explore the possibility of immediate regulatory action.
But they didn't tell us. I'm not trying to be semantical with you, Michael. I'm trying to be honest with you. They didn't tell us on that Friday that they were going to take regulatory action. They didn't tell us that. What they said was they were going to go away to look at all the evidence they've brought together, to have a view of what it meant for them and the organisation. And we didn't get the warning notice until later on in July.
Okay, this just reeks of another Red 3 issue where information is not being given to the council. We're hearing that this was given then, it wasn't given here. How about the Trust and the CQC agreed to give the council the information, everything, then we can see the timeline of events, we can see exactly what the Trust are doing to fix the issues, and we can start doing our statutory duty and holding the Trust to account.
If I move on, the Unified Recovery Plan, which is in the public domain, has the 150 issues that we think as managers we need to take forward to address the CQC concerns.
That matches the CQC concerns.
I know, but I'm trying to answer your question, Michael, as the Acting Chief Executive. I'm trying to give you information to help you assure yourself that we as a leadership team of the Trust have taken on board very seriously what the CQC have said. The CQC have said in their letter the following issues need to be addressed. We as the leadership team have worked with the senior managers in the organisation, the leads, to look at what actions we need to address. The Unified Recovery Plan has 350 items in it. 150 of those are relevant to the CQC. We have shared with the managers responsible for respective areas what the CQC have said about the respective areas. So the safeguarding lead, the infection control lead, the medicine management lead have seen what the CQC have said. They've developed, as officers of the Trust, the actions they think we need to implement to address what the CQC have said. When we finally get the report from the CQC, which we haven't got yet, we're going to get it in August, I'm more than happy to sit down, as I've said before, with the Council and work through what the CQC have said to us, what we then have done as a leadership team with our lead managers to address what the CQC have said. I'm trying to give you the assurance today that we've done it in a very open and transparent way with the lead managers.
We're in a position now, we've got a few months where the Trust has the potential to make significant changes that could make the difference from the Trust being completely inadequate, possible special measures, to just having some concerns. So it's your opportunity to work with the COG rather than wait till we get the full report, the final report, and actually we're then playing catch up.
So I think what Geraint is trying to say is that the things that he needs to address are in the recovery plan. Clearly, if that recovery plan is not comprehensive, that will have issues in it. But as we sit here today, the executive believe that's a fully covering document. So I think we have to accept that that is the case. Obviously, future events might prove different, but that's where we are today. Terry.
Just very briefly, it's about the CQC process. It is not a science. The CQC process is an iterative process. The reason that they ask for confidentiality is because they make mistakes. And without being specific about this inspection or any other, CQC make a lot of mistakes in inspections because they're pressurised, often their records aren't adequate for some of the conclusions that are drawn, so they insist on this confidentiality so that they can go to and fro in refining the findings they make and ensuring that they are accurate. Because if they make a mistake when stuff comes into the public domain, we are a foundation trust and we would sue them possibly. So that's why they go through this process. I think it's fair to say the Chief Exec has been held to account in a whole number of ways around this. This isn't another Red 3. This is about CQC's process, which we have to go along with whether we like it or not. It is not a perfect organisation. It is probably one of the least perfect organisations I've ever worked with, but it has a very clear role. And part of that is this process of confidentiality, so they can get their findings right before they go in the public domain. But Geraint has no say over that.
It'd be useful to know what the next step here, and obviously the key date, the key date coming up is going to be the 10th of September. So Geraint, if you can explain what's supposed to happen then.
Again, what the CQC have said to myself and to the senior manager of the Trust is that they're not expecting by the 10th of September all the issues they've identified to be addressed. What they're expecting by the 10th of September is the organisation to address what I call the high priority areas. And again, they haven't told us what they are. We've got to make that decision as the providing organisation. And then the one they want to see is a respective recovery plan that enables them to see the organisations taking respective actions over a realistic time frame. So they're not expecting when they come in on the 10th of September to have everything addressed. They want to see if the organisation has seen what they're telling us, i.e. we're not in denial, we actually understand what they're telling us. Then that we've got appropriate action plans in place to address the key areas and within an appropriate time frame. What we need to do is therefore to look at what we think are the key areas we need to address. So by the 10th of September, we need to ensure that we have addressed their concerns around what I would call the compliance issues in the Trust. And the compliance issues in the Trust are relating to our policies and procedures and how our staff comply with policies and procedures in terms of infection control, safeguarding and medicines management. Then they also want to see that we've got a realistic plan to address the capacity issues in the Trust around the staff in EOC, the staff in 111 and the operational staff in the field. So that's what they will be looking for, I perceive, as the Chief Exec of the Trust in terms of what they need to expect by September. Then they need to see what we're doing around the bigger issues, as I call them in the organisation, about how are we addressing the cultural issues in the organisation, which relate to how things are done in the organisation, the behaviours, and how we're taking that forward. So the overarching recovery plan, which you see the unified plan with the 350 issues in it, covers all those areas. At the board meeting on Tuesday, there's a very constructive conversation at the board about we know what we need to put right. Have we got the capacity and capability to put it all right? And one of the key challenges we've got as an executive team at the moment is we don't have everybody in the organisation we currently need to address some of those issues. So as this chairman said about our chairman's on holiday, we've identified some key issues we need to take forward. One of those is an improvement director. So Peter and myself are in conversation with NHS Improvement to appoint an improvement director. We are hoping to conclude that next week. We're also looking at bringing in a secondee to cover Kath Start's illness. So Kath currently is off sick at the moment with cancer, unfortunately. So we're going to be bringing in an interim director of quality and safety. Again, we're hoping to conclude that on Monday of next week. We're also bringing in an associate director of quality and safety and an associate director to work to the medical director. So we're trying to bring in capacity to enable us to address what we need to do under the Unified Recovery Plan. We're also looking at bringing in capacity within the Trust because we recognise that some of our key areas need additional capacity. We've already put in capacity into the complaints team. We need to look at that, what we need to do around that, review that. We put a capacity into the safeguarding team and the audit team in the organisation to ensure we have the right skills in the organisation to address some of the structural challenges we have in delivering the CQC review and also assuring the board and ourselves that we know what's going on in the organisation. So again, I'm being very honest with the Council of Governors to say that we've got some issues we need to address to deliver the Unified Recovery Plan, which is why we are focusing on those areas I've talked about in terms of an appropriate workforce plan to deliver the capacity in the operational areas and the areas around compliance.
So, thanks for that, Geraint. I mean, one of the key things that we discussed at the board is the need for the executive to prioritise those things, because clearly they cannot do everything at this particular time. And I think over the last couple of days and going forward, this is going to be a key activity that we have visibility on, is how those priorities have been agreed, so that when we get to the key dates of September, we have a good plan and a credible plan. Because I think one of the things that we need to be clear about at this moment in time is getting to a credible plan that can happen is the most important thing for the Trust.
Briefly, not to labour the point, James Crawley, Public Governor of Kent, just regarding Maggie and Michael's point, I don't think it's about the detail of what's in the CQC and what you can release to us. You can only do what you can do. Do not spin us and do not put glitter on it. And that's the point that I think Maggie's trying to make. If we are in trouble in a particular area, we want to know about it and we want to know how deep. We don't need the detail, we're not running the Trust, but we do need to know what the public are going to ask us.
Okay.
We have given this particular subject, I think, a good airing, and some very good views have been made, but we are now running behind, significantly behind. So may I propose we try to move forward?
Thank you, Brian. So, Geraint, you need to finish off?
Yeah. Well, I think I've hopefully given the Council where we are on the CQC, where we are on the recovery plan, what it means for us, what the key gaps are, what we're trying to do to address it. Hopefully, Brian, as the chair, from your perspective, the lead governor, I am being open and honest. I hope I'm not. What was the phrase you used? Putting glitter on it? I don't think I'm putting glitter on it.
So moving on specifically, Geraint, there's 3 things you need to cover, or 4 things you need to cover: the integrated performance report and where we are with the new EOC, move to operating units, and 111999 performance.
Yeah. I think I've already covered 111 and 99 performance in my update already. Hopefully I have. I've talked to you about we're behind trajectory on 999. We're on trajectory for 111. The move to operating units. The interim director of operations, Ian Ferguson, has had a conversation with the lead managers in the operations directorate, and what they've asked to do is what we call is postpone the implementation of the Band 7 management structure, because there's a view that that needs to be taken forward in an appropriate way with all the managers to understand the implications on Band 8, Band 7 and Band 6s. So a report came to the last board meeting on Tuesday about postponing that and going through a new process, and that was signed off by the board on Tuesday. And that's to ensure that the actual managers who are implemented and impacted by this change are fully engaged and fully involved. So the organisation is ensured that it's from a bottom-up, not a top-down approach. And that's going to be taken forward by Ian. And Ian's got a meeting tomorrow with those managers affected to take that forward. The intention is, though, to still implement operating units. It's not to do away with them, but it's to do it in a way in which the staff affected are fully engaged and fully involved in the solutions and the outcome of that process. In terms of the new OC, the organisation is still committed to go to the new OC in February of next year. There's a detailed plan to deliver that. It's been reviewed by an external assessor. That external assessor has concluded that the plans we have in place are appropriate to deliver the new OC by next February. What we are doing, though, is looking at some potential challenges around that. And at the moment, the challenges we have are, is the supply of power going to be put on in the right time to ensure that we can get the right facilities put on board in terms of fitting out the building? There was a view that that might delay by a month. The view of the team taking it forward is that we will still be able to catch that month up and still go live next February in terms of the EOC. But more importantly, it's not just a building, it's the staff. So what we are doing is we have an engagement one-to-ones with staff affected by the change. All of those one-to-ones will be concluded by the end of August. What those one-to-ones are doing is engaging the staff about, 1, the building, 2, the move, and what that means for them, and what that means for them in terms of their employment and what we need to do to support them to go to the new building. At the moment, very few members of staff are indicating they're not intending to move, which is a very positive thing for the organisation. But what we are doing is we're reviewing that constantly to ensure the organisation understands whether or not that would actually happen next February. Is that fair on that one? And then finally, in terms of the integrated performance report, that report went to the board on Tuesday. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to read it. The key challenges the organisation is read in respective areas, the point that Graham's talked about. And in terms of the areas we are read on our key delivery of our 999 performance and our 111 performance, and that's in terms of hitting the contracted levels, but we've got trajectories to improve the organisation. We are on trajectory for 111, we are behind trajectory on 999. What we've agreed with the commissioners is to look at where we are on the trajectory and what that means for the end of year. Because at the end of year, we're aspiring to deliver 75% for Red 1 and 70% for Red 2. The view of the leadership team in Ops is we can still aspire to deliver 75% for Red 1, but we won't hit 70% for Red 2. So the conversation with the commissioners, well, the people who buy the service in the organisation, is what's a realistic year-end trajectory for Red 2? And that's based on the capacity we have in the organisation and the pressures we've got, because the plan was originally produced on an assumption that our contracted level of activity would be what we'd achieve. We're currently 4% above contracted levels. So that means the activity is above what the commissioners funded us to do. On top of that, we agreed that we'd have roughly 3,000 hours lost per month for handover. We're currently 4,000. So some of the assumptions in the trajectory we agreed to the commissioners are not delivering what we agreed to the commissioners. So that's why we've agreed to relook at and rebase the trajectory for the year end for 999. Can I just finish?
And if you haven't done it already, I would commend you read Ian's board paper where he describes why performance has dropped off compared to the last time we were performing at the required levels, which was 2 years ago. And he's done quite a nice little piece of work sort of articulating why, what the big chunks of things are in that. It's sort of quite illuminating, really. It also shows why it's going to be difficult to get back to the 70% in the short term.
Yeah.
So, opening up for questions.
Concern from IHAG with regard to the EOC, basically it would appear that the other unit in Crawley is not fully accessible as far as toilets are concerned, because they only have toilets, both the toilets have the handrails on the same side, and they wish to, yeah. New Make Ready Centre.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So they want the assurance that that situation isn't going to arise again here, because it was definitely pointed out in advance at for the Make Ready Centres.
I'll take that away and ensure that the facilities for the new building in the HQ in Crawley, that's been taken forward with our contractors, and I'm sure that I'll take that forward to the team to ensure that happens. And also I'll chat to I didn't realise this, but I'll talk to the facilities team about what is happening with the Make Ready in Crawley to ensure that's addressed as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Michael.
I still note that CFR contributions are not on the integrated performance report. They used to be on there. We used to have nice updates on what our CFRs were doing, number of hours, their contribution to Red 1s, Red 2s. Can we maybe see them again on it?
Could I in part answer that, Michael, without answering? You'll see later on the queries raised. That is down as a query, and I was going to address it there if I may.
David?
So, sorry, it appears that every time we have a COG meeting I have some family illness, so apologies for walking out earlier. I'm not going to come again, then I can avoid illness in the family. But I've got a few points about the various reports. I think it would be helpful in the key performance indicators to show the trajectory targets agreed with commissioners, because otherwise it just looks terribly negative and makes the holding to account business quite difficult. In the same vein as I know Brian is obviously going to pick up the comment from Michael, I fail to see how we can say that the integrated performance dashboard is a balanced scorecard when it doesn't account for the performance for over 50% of all of our emergency calls as an ambulance service. And I've been mentioning Green 2 for 2 years, so I think I probably should mention it again at another COG meeting, because not only are Green 2 calls very important for patients, they're an area where we know a high number of serious incidents come from in terms of potential risk to patients, not just in SECAM but other ambulance services. And again, without using the phrase I want it formally minuted, I am really very frustrated and disappointed that every single time I come to this meeting we don't have any visibility about the non-regulated parts of performance which are really important to our patients, the people we represent and the staff we work in it. We talked about appraisals briefly at a couple of the subgroups and also Foundation Council, and it doesn't read terribly well, and I'd just like some assurance, probably from Tim or one of the other NEDs, that we haven't stopped doing appraisals. The workforce charts are good, but when you can't see the target lines because they're either so far above or so far below, again, it makes it difficult for visibility's sake. And the bit that I probably going to state the obvious here is for the last number of months, against every single marker, things appear to have got worse the way I'm reading it. We're absolutely behind the board and the execs and non-execs in terms of trying to turn that around. And I think what would be helpful moving forward is a set of kind of measures which help us see how we're performing against how we're planning to improve against the Unified Recovery Plan.
And I think when it comes to these key performance measures, I think if we're going to add things on, we need to take things off as well. So I think probably the best thing that you can do, Geraint, is take on board the comments, add them in, but then agree which ones you're going to take off. And I think there's some obvious things here that don't add any value. So that will be helpful.
To do that.
Graham.
Just very briefly again. It does paint a rather bleak picture, looking at it, and I hope it's not quite as bad as it actually looks. I mean, for example, hospital turnaround delays. There must be, in all this plethora of papers, some means of actually working out how much of hospital turnaround delays are down to SECAM and how much are down to hospitals. And I know we've had issues at certain hospitals in the area. So the dashboard is fine as it stands. There is far, in my view, there is far too much red on it, and it would be helpful. I say, I have tried very hard to find out the situation about hospital turnaround delays because I don't want to beat you up if there's no reason to beat you up. It depends who it's down to. But it's very hard to actually determine from this report. And again, I do take the point, are we improving, are we getting worse? And again, short of having all these papers for meeting after meeting, which you've then got to compare them all against, it's virtually impossible to do that. But again, I think holding the NEDs to account is really important, and I just think we do need an assurance that there are representatives of the NEDs who are actually taking these very serious red items onto account and are personally looking at them. Because I think if we don't get that assurance, then we as a group here have got something to be concerned about.
You can have assurance that we're looking at them, whether or not they're improving or not is a different issue. I mean, clearly we are having a difficult time as a trust at this moment in time. Things are getting worse, they are not getting better. And turnaround time, I think, Geraint.
In terms of the stats you have in front of you, Graham, they're about the delays that the hospitals are impacting on us. So the reason we couch it in 30 minutes is... I thought that's what you might say, yes. The reason we couch it in 30 minutes is because that's what we're trying to portray to you as our governors and also to the wider system about what impact is the system having on SECAM. And in terms of is it getting better and worse, unfortunately it's getting worse. Our handover delays have increased by 60% over the last 2 years. And the other stat that really I put out there as well, because everyone's aware of it, is last financial year we had 16,000 incidents over 45 minutes. So 16,000 patients that we took to hospitals were delayed over 45 minutes in terms of their clinical handover into the hospital system. What we've done to escalate this is we have basically escalated it via the commissioning process. And I'm also personally meeting the hospitals that we have most challenges with, or the worst performing hospitals, let's use more plain English I suppose in the room, the worst performing hospitals. I'm personally meeting the chief executives, and tomorrow morning I'm going to East Sussex Hospital to meet the chief executive, the director of operations, with our director of operations, to talk about what can we do at Conquest and what can they do at Eastbourne to help us effectively manage patients into the system. We've got a similar meeting arranged with Brighton. I've already met with colleagues at Medway, because Medway's got to hold Medway's performance as best performing, and I've also met colleagues at Down Valley. So what we are doing as a leadership team is going in the respective levels to have a conversation about what does this mean for patients, what does this mean for the staff we employ. And unfortunately, it's not getting better.
So Geraint, probably say something about where you are with Red 1, Red 2 and A19 in terms of the tail.
Right, in terms of the key thing to say as well is that we look at the impact of not delivering our performance. So our medical director and our Director of Paramedic Services, look at with the audit team what is happening to our tail, i.e. how long does it take us to get to patients? Because if we are really having long tails in the organisation and really impacting on patient care, we need to understand whether it needs to be escalated as a SIRI or not, i.e. are we causing harm to patients? And the audit team looks at the patients that are in the tail to whether or not they need to be escalated or not. And on top of that, we look at the shape of the tail, so as it is extending, and it's not extending dramatically, it's extending by a minute, but not dramatically. So what we're trying to do is to understand what impact is this having on the patients we serve. Is that fair to say?
Okay.
Hi there, I'm Charlie Adler, Paramedic Operational Staff Governor. Probably quite a good time possibly to feed in some of that patient perspective then, following on from that. And also, it was really helpful listening to the board recording. And I noted one of the points, was it Katrina that brought up about why we aren't instant reporting delays? And I thought I'd put a bit of staff perspective on that. It was interesting that she stated that the most common cause for IR1s to be submitted to the serious incident, well, the reporting system, is for broken drug vials. And I sort of thought about this, and I asked some of my colleagues why we think this might be and why it's not that we're reporting serious delays. And I think probably it's because there's a stated policy that says clinicians have to. These are incidents which expose individual clinicians to potential culpability. And therefore the onus is on them to document the circumstances. And also, they're rare. I might break a drug vial once a year. Why don't we do it with delays? Because they happen every single day. Often they'll happen every single call. And because we presume the trust knows about it, because the timings are all recorded. You know, the statistics illustrate the delay. There is a feeling that because it's not my fault, why should I report it? Because reporting won't change anything, and there's a real concern whether it's actually borne out that by reporting it hits the ceiling of your local clinical operations manager to investigate the incident, creating a lot of work for them, and they'll come back to you with the answer that the delay was caused by too much demand and not enough supply, which we knew that's the case, and that's why, you know, there's no sort of reason why we're asking this question, if you see what I mean. And often we don't see tangible harm, so we don't report it. I think, I would hope that staff, when they are recognising tangible harm, are reporting it. And also, it's been picked up earlier in regards to safeguarding referrals, which is exactly the same online form. The online form is an awful lot better than the paper form we used to have. It is a lot better. But it still needs to be completed at the end of a minimum 12-hour shift, often a 14-hour shift. The form is still clunky. You need to put in the date of birth of the patient, and then it asks you the patient age, and then it asks you the patient's age range. I would have hoped in the 21st century those latter two could be worked out from the first. And we really, really need to be careful about not making the process of reporting onerous on staff, because then they're going to stop doing it. A bit of specific feedback in terms of beyond the targets. We put posters up that say we're a service that will respond, and please only call us for cardiac arrest, difficulty in breathing, chest pain, major blood loss and blackouts. We are a service, however, that attends road traffic collisions, non-injury falls, accidental care alarm activations, transfers to hospices, transfers between hospitals, abdominal pain, vomiting, rashes, mental health crises, checking over requests and headaches. Perhaps we need to be honest that the reason we're not achieving our targets is because we're trying to do everything. In short, we're trying to run a primary and urgent care service on an emergency care footing and budget, it would appear. I'm absolutely not saying that we shouldn't be going out to pick people up who've fallen over and on the floor, but I am saying that these patients should not be competing for the same resource that's needed to resuscitate a paediatric cardiac arrest. On Friday, the 22nd, I went to two patients who had fallen and needed picking up. They were both category C, 60 calls. One waited 5 hours and 13 minutes on the floor, the other 4 hours and 24 minutes. This is the human face of missed targets. It's not good enough. We need to look at commissioning and protecting services that serve the patients that call us. We need a designated full service. There's been trials across the country, and every single time they've been done, they work. We need to look at protecting individual patient groups. We've got a really good model in the neonatal transfer service, that is protected, the temptation to use it for category A calls is removed because it's a protected resource. If we had specific resources for specific patient groups, we could actually start protecting our core emergency service to respond to emergencies. I don't want to go on too long as a sort of sermon according to Charlie, but some of the other issues that were brought up is, why is this job cycle time increased? I've said before in this forum that I spend very little time with my highest acuity patients because it's very obvious they need to go to hospital. I spend an enormous amount of time with my complex patients because they don't want or need to go to hospital. They've often contacted 999 or 111 for clinical advice. They've been screened for a life threat, and they've got an ambulance put on their driveway to see whether there is one. That ambulance now can't respond. You cannot respond to a drowning patient nearby if you're sitting on scene documenting a 3-week history of diarrhea, which is a case I had last week. We talk a lot about ambulances sitting outside hospitals. We talk very little about ambulance crews sitting in people's living rooms. And I think we need to change that. We lose resources the moment we allocate them. We do not have resilience. Our services are tied up. We go one job to the next. And just to finish, I think it's important that we need to start stating that as an emergency service, we have as much of an obligation to the patient who might call next as we do to the patient who has called last. And I'll probably stop there.
Very excellent points made.
Can I say, at the previous COG meeting, Charlie raised similar issues, and we agreed that we would invite Charlie to talk to our commissioners, because I think it's really important that our commissioners hear from one of our staff the system we're operating in and what that means for us, and some of the solutions Charlie's put up there. Because I think if we could get the commissioners to recognise that we're not going there just to moan, excuse my language, I'm not saying you are, but not to moan, but to actually get them to understand what the system's doing to the organisation, what we can then work with them to resolve is really, really tangible. And we are going to take that forward, so Charlie's going to come to meet in the commission and have our conversation. I'd also like to pick up on Charlie's point about what is normal and what we normalised in the organisation, and how do we have a conversation with the staff about it's not normal to wait in excess of 45 minutes at the front end of an A&E, because it shouldn't be. And I think we've got to ensure that our staff understand that actually it isn't normal. And then how do we do it in a constructive way which doesn't lead to tensions between our staff and the A&E staff? Because what we don't want is that turf warfare to happen at the front end of the A&E. And again, I think that's one of the challenges I'm taking forward when I meet the chief execs of the hospitals. And that's the conversation we're having. And I'm hoping that by operating all the levels, we can get some understanding that it's not normal to have a 60% increase in handover delays the last 2 years. Roughly 90,000 hours were lost last year to handover delays, in excess of 30 minutes to the Trust. And the reason I bang on about that is the point that Charlie's made, is that we're not then responding to the next call. So it's really important we get an understanding about patient care, patient experience and staff as well, supporting them. I'll finish there.
Thanks for that. We've got time for one last question for Geraint before we ask him to leave the room. Peter.
It's a hugely important issue, and Charlie's done an excellent job of highlighting it. Mr. Chairman, may I ask, would this be appropriate to maybe block off a bit of time at one of our future meetings to have a presentation from the board on exactly how we're addressing this with our maybe top 3 or top 4 hospitals that are creating the biggest delays, and we can have a dedicated piece of time maybe in August or September to learn what exactly is going on and how we can help address, because this is a really big issue for the Trust.
It won't work in September, I'm afraid, because of the shortened council meeting, but we could discuss it for the one after that.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for that. You've got one final thing, okay?
Yeah. In the spirit of being very open and transparent with the COG, because I need to be moving forward, as part of our discussions with NHS Improvement, which was formerly NHS, was formerly Monitor, we've had a conversation about how do we learn as SECAM from other organisations, now do we ensure we are learning from other organisations. So we've agreed to work in a buddy relationship or collaborative relationship with another ambulance trust to learn from what they do, and conversely, what can they learn from us. So we've had a two-way discussion with them, and that organisation is South Central Ambulance Service. So we're agreeing that we are going to work in collaboration with South Central Ambulance Service on learning from them and them learning from us what we're going to learn from each other going forward, and also get some external validation of what we do in the trust. So if we do safeguarding this way, how do they do it? If we do medicine management this way, how do they do it? So it's genuinely about learning from each other, and that will be put to the public domain hopefully next week at the latest, because we just signed it off at the board this week.
Thanks.
Could you not be very clear what it is and what it isn't?
Okay.
As Peter was at the board, I think.
It's not a merger. Let's be very clear. It's not a merger. It's not a takeover, because it's not a merger. It's a collaboration and working to understand what we can learn from each other. However, who knows what might happen in the future on everything else, but at the moment, it's not a merger. And we need to be very clear about that, because I put that into the public domain in some of the messaging I've been giving to the staff as well. So in my message of the week, the staff have already been told it's not about that. And it's really important that you as the council understand that, because we don't want any hairs going off that sometimes go off in the organisation. Is that fair? So please take in the spirit I've just given it to you in that very open and transparent way. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Graham. So what I propose, we have a 15-minute break.
I'll make one quick final point as well before Geraint is off the hook. And this isn't a dig at you at all, Geraint. Just based on your answer to Peter earlier, who asked the question, it was pretty obvious, certainly to me, that you have no idea what the question was asked at the last COG, that you didn't have an answer to. Exactly, you're looking blankly. I don't give up my time for the good of my health here. If I ask a formal question in this sort of environment, I would expect it to be noted and expect some sort of response, even if that response is, we have not yet had time to look at that, as opposed to, clearly, the message didn't even get passed on. So for the times when you're not in the room and you delegate someone else in the exec to come along, they need to report back to you exactly what questions have been asked. Okay. Otherwise, it makes you look a bit... Yeah.
Point taken. Thank you for that. Point taken.
So if we can come back at 11:45. Thanks.